So today, we're going to dive into a pretty intense and fascinating documented journey. This is the story of Frank Rodriguez, a guy who went from having these completely unexplained, debilitating symptoms all the way to a self-directed recovery. It's really a story about what happens when the system just doesn't have an answer for you and you're forced to go out and find your own. Let's get into it.
And this quote right here, it really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. This isn't just some feel-good story about getting better. No. It's about what happens when all the conventional paths are dead ends, and you have to become your own detective, your own advocate.
All right, so to really understand the disruption, we first have to understand the system that got disrupted. And we're not talking about a computer system, we're talking about Frank's life. A highly disciplined, highly structured life that was about to be suddenly and violently thrown off the rails.
Now take a look at this. This slide is so important because it establishes the baseline. This was not a person living a chaotic lifestyle, We're talking about a quiet, structured routine. Daily walks, clean hydration, no alcohol, no sugar. He was even studying cybersecurity, a field all about order and protecting systems. This was a man who was absolutely in control of his world.
And then, just like that, all of that control was shattered. Not once, but twice, in less than a single week. First, he faints out of nowhere from a kidney stone and smacks his head hard. Then, just 5 days later, while he's probably still reeling from that, he gets hit by a car. This 1-2 punch of trauma is the spark that lights the fuse for everything that comes next.
So that brings us to the next phase of this story, which is really the heart of the conflict. It's these months of just uncertainty, where Frank's own meticulous, careful documentation of his symptoms goes head-to-head with the official medical assessment he's being given. And this timeline, man, it just lays out how long and grueling this process was. We're talking months, May, June, July, of him just suffering and methodically tracking every single thing happening to his body, all before he even gets a scan. And then you see that shift in October, that's when things get even scarier. And you gotta understand, these weren't just vague, I don't feel good complaints. Look how consistent this is. For 3 straight months, he's logging these very specific, debilitating symptoms. The headaches, the instability, the mental fog. He wasn't just feeling sick, he was building a case file, an evidence log, on his own condition. So after months of waiting, after all that meticulous documentation, he finally gets that CT scan. And the result? The official word from the hospital? These 3 words. No acute pathology. Imagine that. All his data, all his suffering, just dismissed. A verdict that says nothing is seriously wrong.
And this is where you really see the massive disconnect. It's just night and day. On the left, you've got the official diagnosis, stable condition, no acute pathology, discharged. And on the right, you have his actual daily reality, constant headaches, mental fog, and he's starting to have trouble just walking right. The system story and his story were 2 completely different realities.
And this right here, this is the turning point inside the crisis. His main tool for checking on himself, his daily walk, suddenly wasn't reliable anymore. The problem wasn't just in his head. It had physically moved down to his legs, creating this whole new level of instability and, honestly, fear.
So what do you do then? The official system has no answers for you. Your condition is getting worse. Well, he turned to a public forum. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was looking for a witness.
Yeah, feeling completely unheard, he turned to the streaming platform Big O Live. His goal was to create a public, real-time record of what he was going through. He wasn't just telling his story anymore, he was showing it, broadcasting the instability in his legs, live, for anyone out there to see. And then, someone new enters his stream, a user named VIP Earth 9th. But this person was different. They didn't comment, they didn't offer advice. For days, they just watched. They observed Frank's condition, they listened to his detailed explanations, and they just stayed there, present. And in Frank's own words, this was everything. He saw me. After months of being dismissed and told nothing was wrong, someone was finally witnessing his reality without judgment. That simple act of just being seen was the first real step toward a change. So after 4 days of just silent observation, this witness finally speaks. And what he says is completely out of left field, something no doctor had even hinted at. He says, "You're dealing with parasites." Now for Frank, who was just desperate for any kind of answer, this was like a lightning bolt. It was a totally new framework, a new lens to understand all the symptoms he had been so carefully documenting.
And that theory didn't just hang in the air. It came with a plan, a specific, actionable plan, a plan that would become what Frank calls the reversal protocol.
Okay, now let's look at what's actually in this protocol. And we have to be crystal clear here, all right? This is one person's story, his anecdotal experience, and this is not medical advice. But for Frank, this was the path he chose to take. And it wasn't just a random list of supplements. Each one had a specific purpose in this new theory. You see things like Black Walnut and Wormwood, described as terrain sweepers for those proposed parasites. Then you have Spirulina for blood building, black seed oil for inflammation. It was a whole systematic approach.
But here's the key, and this is so important to get. The protocol, the ingredients, that was only half the equation. The other half was Frank's own inherent nature. That same discipline we saw at the very beginning of this story. That's what made the reversal actually possible.
See, it wasn't just what he took, it was how he took it. He applied this protocol like a scientist. He documented everything. I mean, he literally photographed every single product to seal the proof. He isolated certain ingredients on an empty stomach, timed others for specific moments, and most importantly, he tracked every dose and every single response from his body. This was a data-driven activation.
And the results? Well, according to his own detailed records, they were life-changing. We're not talking about just feeling a little better. These were concrete, observable changes that he logged. His knees actually held. His stride came back. That constant feeling that he was about to collapse just stopped. He could walk again, not just physically, but without that constant fear. From his perspective, the protocol was working.
In this quote, man, it just brings the entire journey full circle, doesn't it? It perfectly sums up his main point. This recovery wasn't handed to him by the system that had dismissed him. No, it was earned. It came from his own discipline, from the clarity he got from that one online witness, and from his own decision to take action.
And that's what it all leaves us with, this really powerful question. It kind of challenges all of us to think, when the official story doesn't add up, when the map you're given leads to a dead end, how do you write your own? How do you take back control of your own story?